The first sign that something was wrong wasn't dramatic. It was the absence of something. A notification that didn't come. Every morning for 5 years, my phone would buzz with a Slack message from my co-founder, Derek. Just a simple morning, builder, or a link to some tech news. It was our ritual, the digital handshake that started the day. On that Tuesday, there was nothing. I checked Slack. His icon was gray. I checked WhatsApp. Last seen, 3 days ago. I checked email. Nothing. I told myself he was sick, burned out, needed a break. By Friday, the silence had a weight to it. And that's when I opened the App Store and saw it. Voyager 2.0, now a solo journey. Launched by Derek Vance. All my code, all my architecture, all my late-night breakthroughs repackaged, rebranded, and solo. No mention of me. Voyager wasn't just an app. It was our baby. A productivity tool disguised as a game, using behavioral psychology to help people build habits. The idea was mine, a concept I'd sketched on napkins during a particularly soul-crushing corporate job. The technical architecture, the algorithms, the elegant little loops that made it work. That was me, Marcus, the builder. Derek was the talker, the charmer, the one who could walk into a room of skeptical investors and leave with checks. We were the perfect startup cliché, the nerd and the hustler. We'd met in an entrepreneurship bootcamp 5 years ago. I had the prototype, a clunky but functional proof of concept. He had the pitch deck, the connections, the relentless optimism. He saw value in my messy code. I saw a way out of my solitary basement existence. We incorporated as equals, 50/50ths. I built. He sold. It worked. The first 2 years were a grind. I lived on ramen and caffeine, iterating, debugging, rebuilding from scratch twice. Derek worked his network, sleeping on couches at conferences, pitching anyone who'd listen. Then we hit. A modest seed round from a boutique VC firm that believed in the vision. Then a bigger round. Then users, real users, not just our moms. We grew to a team of 12. I hired engineers. Derek hired salespeople. The dynamic shifted. I was still building, but now I was managing builders. Derek was out there, becoming the face of Voyager. Interviews, podcasts, panels. He was good at it. I was happy in the background, solving problems. But the problems started changing. Not technical problems, relational ones. Derek began making decisions without consulting me. A feature he'd promised a key client that required a massive architectural overhaul. A hiring freeze he'd announced to the team without discussing the cash flow issues. Small betrayals, each one explainable, each one eroding trust. I'd confront him, and he'd apologize, charm his way out, promise better communication. The pattern was so smooth it felt like a feature, not a bug. Then came the acquisition talks. A mid-sized tech company, Nexusoft, was sniffing around. Derek handled the early conversations. Just exploratory, he'd say. Nothing to worry about. I was focused on scaling the infrastructure for our explosive user growth. I didn't push. I trusted him. That was my mistake. The week before he ghosted me, we had a tense call. He wanted to restructure equity, to make the deal sweeter for investors. He proposed creating a new class of shares that would dilute my stake. I refused. He got quiet. "We'll talk later," he said. And then the silence began. The discovery of Voyager 2.0, Solo Journey, in the App Store was a physical blow. I stared at the screen, the blood draining from my face. The icon was slightly redesigned, sleeker, more corporate. The description was pure Derek. After years of partnership, I've decided to take Voyager in a bold new direction. Solo. Because sometimes the best journey is the one you take alone. He'd erased me. Publicly, professionally, permanently. I scrolled through the screenshots. The interface was mine. The features were the ones I'd architected. It was our app, with my name scraped off like old paint. The comments section was already filling up. Users confused, asking where I was. A few beta testers from the early days posting things like, "Wait, what about Marcus? He was the brains." A few nasty replies calling me a hanger-on and a coaster. Derek's PR machine was already spinning the narrative, the visionary founder bravely going it alone, shedding dead weight. I tried to log into the company GitHub. Access revoked. The company Slack. Access revoked. The AWS console where our entire infrastructure lived. Access still worked.
For now.
My heart hammered. He'd been thorough, but not thorough enough. Maybe he thought I wouldn't notice until it was too late. Maybe he thought I was just the code monkey who wouldn't fight. I sat in my dark apartment, the glow of my monitor, the only light. 5 years. 5 years of my life, poured into lines of code, into algorithms, into a vision I'd birthed. And he'd just taken it. The anger was a cold, clean thing. It didn't burn, it clarified. I started making a list. A mental inventory of everything I controlled, everything he'd overlooked. Item 1. The core algorithm. The behavioral engine that made Voyager addictive, the thing users actually paid for, was my proprietary design. I'd never fully documented it. The other engineers understood the implementation, but the underlying logic, the secret sauce, was in my head and in a private, encrypted repository only I could access. Derek had the compiled code, the running app. But if he needed to modify the core engine, to fix a fundamental bug, to scale it in a new direction, he'd be blind. Item 2. The server architecture. We ran on AWS, and I was the sole administrator of the root account. The one with the keys to the entire kingdom. I'd set it up years ago, using my personal email, my personal credit card for the initial free tier. Over the years, as we grew, we transitioned to a company account, but the root credentials? Still mine. Still tied to my phone for two-factor authentication. Derek could change all the user permissions he wanted, but if I logged in as root, I could see everything. I could even, theoretically, shut it all down. Item 3. The legal filings. I pulled up the incorporation documents. We were 50/50ths partners. The intellectual property assignment agreement we'd all signed? It assigned rights to the company, not to Derek personally. The code he'd launched as his solo project was company IP. And unless he'd formally dissolved the company or bought me out, which he hadn't, that code was still jointly owned. I wasn't a ghost. I was a shareholder. A 50% shareholder in a company that had just launched a product under a new, solo brand, without board approval, without shareholder vote. That wasn't just a betrayal. It was a legal liability for him and a massive lever for me. I called my lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Priya, who'd helped with our seed round documents. It was late, but she answered. I explained the situation, my voice surprisingly calm. She listened, asked a few clarifying questions, then let out a low whistle. Marcus, this is aggressive. If he's launched a competing product using company IP, without dissolving the company or buying you out, he's in breach of fiduciary duty and likely in violation of his own shareholder agreement. You have standing to sue him, the company, and possibly even the new entity for injunctive relief. You could shut him down. I don't want to just shut him down, I said, the cold clarity solidifying into a plan. I want what's mine. I want the credit. I want the company back, or I want it gone. But I want him to know, publicly, that he didn't build this alone. That's a different fight, Priya warned. Public, messy, and expensive. But if you have the goods, the IP documentation, the root access, the paper trail, you have leverage. The question is, do you use it quietly to force a settlement, or do you go nuclear? I looked at the App Store listing again. The comments were growing. A few tech bloggers had picked up the solo relaunch story, framing Derek as a heroic solo founder. The narrative was already set, and I was the invisible man. Nuclear, I said, but carefully. I want to build the bomb before I drop it. That night, I didn't sleep. I documented everything. Screenshots of the App Store listing, the company records, the GitHub access logs showing my revoked permissions, the AWS root credentials confirmation. I drafted a timeline of the last 5 years, highlighting every major contribution, every late-night breakthrough. I wrote a private, detailed narrative of the betrayal. Not for a lawyer, for the public. For the moment when I'd need the world to understand. Then I did something small but symbolic. I logged into the AWS root account. I didn't change anything. I just looked. The servers were humming, processing millions of user interactions, all running on architecture I'd built. He thought he'd taken everything. He'd forgotten the foundation. So, what's my first move? Do I pull the plug immediately, crashing his launch? Or do I wait, let him build momentum, and then pull the rug at the most devastating moment? Let me know your strategy in the comments. In part 2, the counter-surveillance begins, and I watch my creation thrive under his name, waiting for the perfect moment to strike.
Subscribe.
I watched Voyager 2.0 climb the App Store charts like a proud parent watching a stranger raise their child. Day 1, number 450 in productivity. Day 3, number 112. Day 5, number 28. The downloads hit 500,000, then 1 million. Tech blogs ran glowing profiles. How Derek Vance built a 1 million download app solo. He gave interviews about the vision and the grind. He never mentioned me, not once. I sat in my dark apartment, refreshing the charts, the cold satisfaction of my hidden leverage growing with every new user. Let him build his castle on my foundation. The higher it rose, the harder it would fall. The silence from Derek was absolute. No call, no text, no email. He'd erased me so completely, it was almost impressive. Our mutual friends in the startup world went quiet too, either taking his side or, more likely, waiting to see which way the wind blew before choosing.
I was a ghost in my own life.
But ghosts can see things the living can't. I set up a monitoring system. Nothing illegal, just publicly available data, scraped and organized. I tracked Voyager's App Store rankings, user reviews, social media mentions. I set up Google Alerts for Derek Vance and Voyager app. I watched his solo narrative solidify in real time. The user reviews were fascinating. Mostly positive, the app worked after all. But every few dozen reviews, there was a question. What happened to the original co-founder? I remember reading about 2 founders. And beneath it, sometimes, a reply from a verified user with a blue check. Derek was always the visionary. The other guy was just along for the ride. I recognized the phrasing. It was too polished, too on-brand. Derek or his PR team was astroturfing the comments, shaping the narrative. That was the first crack. If he was this worried about perception, he knew he had a vulnerability. I expanded my surveillance. I found the new company registration, Voyager Labs, LLC. Filed 2 weeks before the app launch. Sole member, Derek Vance. He'd created a new legal entity, transferred the IP, my IP, company IP, into it and left me and the original company as empty shells. That was the second crack, a potentially fraudulent transfer. The third crack was technical. I still had root access to the AWS account. Every night I'd log in and just watch. The server logs showed me everything. User growth, peak usage times, error rates. The architecture was humming. My architecture. And then on day 8 I saw something interesting. A new server instance had been spun up. Not by me. Not by the old engineering team. I'd checked. Their credentials were still revoked. This was Derek, or someone he'd hired, trying to set up their own infrastructure. But they'd made a mistake. They'd used the same AWS account, the one I still controlled, instead of creating a new one. They were building their castle on my land, using my tools, and they didn't even know I was watching from the tower. I could see their new code repository. It was a mess. Without access to my original architecture docs, they were reverse engineering their own system, introducing bugs, creating technical debt. The core algorithm, my secret sauce, was a black box to them. They had the compiled version running, but they couldn't modify it, couldn't optimize it, couldn't fix it if it broke. I called Priya, my lawyer. They're using the old AWS account. My root access still works. I can see everything. She was quiet for a moment. Marcus, that's dangerous. If you access anything, you could be accused of hacking. But if you just observe, observation isn't a crime. Document everything. Timestamps, IP addresses, server logs. Build your case. So I watched. I documented. I became a silent archivist of my own destruction. The week before the crash, I saw the warning signs. Error rates creeping up. Server response times slowing. The new engineers were pushing code that conflicted with my underlying architecture. They didn't understand the dependencies, the subtle interactions I'd built into the system. It was like watching someone try to tune a Formula One engine with a hammer. On a Friday afternoon, I got an alert. A critical service had gone down. Users were reporting login failures. The error log showed a cascade of failures tracing back to a single, ill-advised optimization the new team had pushed. They'd tried to modify a core module without understanding it. The system was designed to fail gracefully, but only if you knew the fail-safes. They didn't. So it failed spectacularly. The app went dark for 6 hours. When it came back online, user reviews were savage. Lost all my data. Can't log in. What happened to this app? Derek's PR machine went into overdrive, blaming unexpected infrastructure challenges and promising stability. But the damage was done. Trust, once cracked, is hard to repair. I watched the App Store ranking plummet. From number 28 to number 112 to number 450. Back to where it started. In less than 2 weeks. That's when Derek finally reached out. Not a call. Not a text. A formal email sent to my old company address, CCNG, a lawyer I didn't recognize. Subject, Voyager Labs formal communication. Dear Marcus, this letter is to formally inform you that your relationship with Voyager and its related entities has been terminated effective date 2 weeks ago. Your access to company resources was revoked at that time for cause, including but not limited to breach of fiduciary duty and failure to perform contractual obligations. Any attempt to access or interfere with Voyager's systems, data, or intellectual property will be treated as unauthorized access under state and federal law and prosecuted to the fullest extent. If you have any questions, please direct them to the undersigned. It was a masterpiece of gaslighting. He'd fired me for cause 2 weeks ago and was now threatening me with prosecution if I defended myself. He'd created a fictional timeline where I was the bad actor, he was the wronged founder, and any evidence I had was retroactively tainted. I forwarded the email to Priya. Her response was immediate. He's scared. This is a preemptive strike. He knows you have leverage, and he's trying to intimidate you into silence. Don't respond. Don't engage. Let me draft the response. The next day, Priya sent a letter. It was short, formal, and devastating. Dear Counsel, we are in receipt of your client's communication. Please be advised that our client, Marcus Chen, is a 50% shareholder of the original Voyager entity, which remains active and undissolved. Any transfer of assets, including intellectual property, to a new entity without shareholder approval is a breach of fiduciary duty and likely constitutes fraudulent conveyance. Furthermore, our client retains all rights to access and monitor systems and data that he legally owns as a co-founder and shareholder. Any threats of prosecution are baseless and will be met with counterclaims for harassment and bad faith. We suggest your client focus on explaining to his investors and users why the app has been unstable for the past 48 hours, a direct result of his unauthorized and incompetent modification of our client's proprietary architecture. We await your serious proposals for resolution. I read it 3 times, a grim smile spreading across my face. The trap was set. The castle was built on my land. And now, the rightful owner had just served eviction papers. The response from Derek's lawyer came 3 days later. It wasn't a settlement offer. It was a lawsuit.
He was suing me
for tortious interference, unauthorized access, and defamation. The filing was public. Tech blogs picked it up within hours. Voyager founder sues estranged co-founder over sabotage claims. The narrative was flipping again. I was the bitter, vengeful ex-partner trying to destroy a successful startup. Derek was the victim, fighting to protect his vision. I stared at the headlines, the cold clarity of my plan now a roaring fire. He wanted a public war.
Fine.
I'd give him one, but I'd bring receipts. So, what's my countermove? Do I release the AWS logs showing his team's incompetence? Do I go to the press with my story? Or do I have a more devastating card to play? Let me know your strategy in the comments. Part 3 is where the war goes public and the world starts picking sides.
Subscribe.
The lawsuit was a gift. Derek thought he was silencing me, but he just handed me a megaphone. Within 24 hours of the filing, my inbox was flooded with media requests. TechCrunch, Wired, The Information. They all wanted the other side of the story. I ignored them all. Priya advised silence. Let them dig. Let them wonder why you're not talking. It builds suspense. But I wasn't silent everywhere. I was building something in the background. A website. Not a blog, not a rant. A clean, professional timeline.
Code.
Documents. Evidence. And at the center of it, a single, devastating piece of proof Derek had forgotten he'd ever sent. The website took me 3 days to build. I called it the Voyager Files. It was minimalist black text on white like an academic paper. The homepage had a single line, the story of an app, a partnership, and a betrayal. All documented. All verifiable. Below it, a chronological timeline. Year 1. Our incorporation documents. 50-50 ownership. Signed by both of us. Year 2. Early pitch decks. My name on every slide as co-founder and CTO. Year 3. The seed round term sheet. My signature next to his. Year 4. Emails discussing the acquisition interest from Nexusoft. My concerns about equity dilution. His dismissive replies. Year 5. The week before he goes to me. A Slack exchange where he assured me we'd figure out the equity thing together. Then, the centerpiece. A video file. Not of me, of him. A recording of a Zoom call from 18 months ago, when we were still partners, still friends. He was pitching a potential investor, and I was on the call as his technical co-founder. The investor asked a detailed question about the core algorithm. Derek turned to me, gestured, and said, "I'll let Marcus explain that. He's the genius who built it. I just sell it." The video was time-stamped. It was authentic. And it was the single most damning piece of evidence imaginable. In his own words, on a recorded call with a third party, he'd credited me as the architect. 18 months before he claimed I was just along for the ride. I hadn't stolen the recording. It was from a company Zoom account we both had access to. I downloaded it months ago, before he revoked my access, as part of my personal archive of our work together. It was legal. It was mine. But I didn't publish it.
Not yet.
I built the website, uploaded all the documents, embedded the video as private, password protected. Then I sat on it. Priya was nervous. If you release that, there's no going back. It's nuclear. He'll be destroyed professionally, but you'll be the guy who destroyed him. That has consequences. I know, I said. But he's already destroying me.
Publicly.
This isn't revenge. It's self-defense. The media pressure intensified. Derek gave interviews painting me as a disgruntled employee who'd been fired for poor performance. One outlet ran a piece titled "The Toxic Co-Founder," inside the Voyager meltdown. They quoted anonymous sources close to the company describing my erratic behavior and unprofessional conduct. It was a character assassination, and it was working. A few of our mutual contacts reached out, not to support me, but to ask if I was okay. The implication was clear. They'd heard the rumors, and they weren't sure who to believe. I needed to shift the narrative without fully committing to nuclear war. I needed a teaser. I contacted one reporter, a woman named Sarah, who'd covered our seed round years ago and had always been fair. I sent her a single screenshot, the Slack exchange from the week before he ghosted me, where he said, "We'll figure out the equity thing together." I didn't provide context, just the image. She ran a short piece. New evidence emerges in Voyager co-founder dispute. It wasn't front-page news, but it planted a seed. It showed that I wasn't silent, that I had evidence, that the story was more complicated than Derek's solo narrative. The reaction was immediate. Derek's PR team went into overdrive, calling the Slack message cherry-picked and out of context. They demanded I release all communications. I ignored them. Then, the first Rayal crack appeared. A former Voyager engineer, someone I'd hired years ago, tweeted, "I worked at Voyager for 3 years. Marcus was the technical heart of that company. Derek was the face. Anyone saying otherwise wasn't there." The tweet went viral in tech circles. Other former employees started liking and retweeting. A few posted their own stories. The dam was developing hairline fractures. Derek's response was to double down. He gave an interview to a major tech podcast where he said, "Look, I don't want to trash Marcus. He contributed in the early days. But startups evolve. People get left behind. It's sad, but it's business." The host, a fawning fan of his, nodded along. "It's his story now," the host concluded. "And it's a hell of a story." I watched the interview, the cold fury solidifying into a surgical calm. He'd just made a critical error. He'd admitted I contributed in the early days. That was an opening. I could use that to frame the entire narrative around ownership of the foundational IP, the core algorithm that made the app work. If I contributed it and it was never signed away from me personally, then he was building on stolen ground. Priya and I worked through the night, drafting a legal filing. Not a lawsuit, a motion to intervene in his lawsuit against me, with a counterclaim for declaratory judgment. We would ask the court to determine, once and for all, who owned the core intellectual property of Voyager. We would present the video, the emails, the incorporation documents. We would force him to either admit I built it or perjure himself. The motion was filed on a Thursday. By Friday, it was public. Tech reporters scrambled to understand the implications. The video was mentioned in the filing, but not released. The mystery deepened. That weekend, Derek's app crashed again. Not a small glitch, a full, multi-day outage. Users were furious. The reviews tanked. The tech blogs, now primed by the legal drama, started asking harder questions. If Derek built this solo, why can't he keep it running? I watched from my apartment, the AWS root account still my silent window into his crumbling empire. The error logs told the story. They tried to patch the core algorithm again, and again they'd failed. They were flying blind, hacking at a machine they didn't understand. And the machine was dying. On Monday morning, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. It was Derek. His voice was strained, stripped of its usual polish. "Marcus, we need to talk." I was silent for a moment. "You're suing me, Derek. Talk to my lawyer." "I'm dropping a lawsuit. Just call it off. The website, the filing, whatever you're planning. Let's settle this quietly." Quietly. I laughed, a hollow sound. "You launched a solo app. You gave interviews calling me dead weight. You sued me. And now you want quiet. What do you want?" His voice cracked. "Name it. Equity, cash, credit, whatever. Just make this stop." I looked at my computer screen. The Voyager Files website was open, the video still password protected. The AWS console showed another cascade of errors. His team was making it worse. The app was bleeding users. The investors were panicking. He was offering me everything I'd wanted: recognition, compensation, a settlement. All I had to do was agree to disappear quietly, to let him save face, to let the narrative remain murky. But if I took that deal, the world would never know the full truth. The video would stay private. The record would remain incomplete. So, what would you do? Take the settlement, protect your financial future, and walk away? Or release the video, tell the full story, and accept that you'll be known as the guy who destroyed his own creation to save his reputation? Let me know in the comments. Part 4 is the decision and the consequences that follow.
Subscribe.
I didn't answer Derek right away. I let him hang in the silence, feeling the weight of his own desperation. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm, measured. "I want 3 things. First, a public statement from you, on your social media, your website, and in an interview with TechCrunch, acknowledging that I am the co-founder and the original architect of Voyager's core technology. Second, a 50% stake in the new company, retroactively granted with full voting rights. Third, a formal apology in writing for the smear campaign." The silence on his end was deafening. I could hear him breathing, calculating, hating every second of this conversation. Derek's response was a strangled laugh. "You're insane. A public statement? That would destroy me. The investors would pull out. The board would fire me." "That's not my problem," I said. "You built this mess. I'm just offering you a way out that doesn't involve me releasing the video and the AWS logs to every tech journalist on the planet." "You wouldn't. That would kill the app. Kill the company. Kill everything we built." "We built," I corrected. "And you already killed it. The app is crashing. Users are leaving. The only question is whether you go down as a solo founder who couldn't hack it or as a guy who tried to steal from his partner and got caught. Your choice." Another long silence. Then, quietly, "I need to think. You have 24 hours. I hung up. Priya was against the deal. He'll never follow through. He'll agree under duress, then find a way to weasel out. The only leverage you have is the video and the threat of public exposure. If you accept a settlement that keeps those private, you lose your power." "Maybe," I said. "But if I release everything, I become the villain to half the world. The guy who nuked a million-user app out of spite. The narrative gets muddy. This way, he admits the truth publicly. I get my credit. The record is set straight." She shook her head. "He won't do it. Watch." She was right. The next morning, instead of a call from Derek, I got a press release from his lawyer. Voyager Labs announces strategic restructuring and new investment round. Buried in the fine print was a note. The company has reached an amicable resolution with former contractor Marcus Chun regarding his claims. All disputes have been resolved to the satisfaction of all parties, and Mr. Chun has agreed to cease all legal actions and public statements regarding the matter. Former contractor. He done it again. Reframed me as hired help, not a co-founder. And he'd announced it publicly, preemptively, making it impossible for me to counter, without looking like the one breaking the amicable resolution. I stared at the press release, the cold fury returning. He'd used the 24 hours not to think, but to strategize. He'd spun my offer into a public relations win, painting himself as the reasonable founder cleaning up a messy dispute. And he'd done it so fast, so smoothly, that I looked like the bitter ex-employee who'd already been paid off. I called Priya, my voice shaking with rage. "Did you see this?" "I saw it. It's a masterclass in gaslighting. He's betting you'll be too slow to respond, that the narrative will set before you can correct it. He's wrong." I opened my laptop. The Voyager Files website was still live. The video was still private. The AWS logs were still documented. I had one move left, and it was the one I'd hoped to avoid. I called Sarah, the reporter who'd been fair to me. "I'm releasing the video, and the logs, and everything, tonight. Can you run the story?" She didn't hesitate. "Send it. I'll have a piece up within the hour." I transferred the files. I unlocked the video on the website. I posted a single tweet from an account I'd created months ago at Voyager Files with a link. The full story, the video, the documents. Decide for yourself. Then I waited. The response was immediate and seismic. Sarah's article went live within 45 minutes. Headline: "The tape Derek Vance didn't want you to hear. Co-founder's own words prove partnership was real." The article embedded the video, the full, unedited Zoom call where Derek, in front of an investor, called me the genius who built it. It included screenshots of the AWS error logs, showing the cascade of failures caused by his team's incompetent modifications. It included the Slack exchange from the week before he ghosted me. The tech world erupted. Twitter/X was a firestorm. Hashtag VoyagerGate trended for hours. Former employees amplified the story. Investors who'd backed Derek started distancing themselves. The narrative flipped, completely and irrevocably. Derek's response was a panicked, poorly worded statement posted on Voyager's website. "The video is misleading. It's out of context. Marcus was always a valued contributor, but the vision was mine. It was too little, too late." The context was clear. His own words had convicted him. The app's ratings plummeted further. Users, now aware of the drama, started leaving one-star reviews en masse, not about the app's functionality, but about its founder's ethics. The download numbers, already sliding, fell off a cliff. 24 hours after the video dropped, Voyager Labs board held an emergency meeting. I know because one of the board members, a woman I'd met once at a company party years ago, called me.
Her name was Diane.
She'd always been kind, professional. "Marcus," she said, her voice tired. "We need to talk. The situation is untenable. Derek has been asked to take a leave of absence pending an investigation. The investors are threatening to pull their funding. The company is days from collapse." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said and meant it. Despite everything, I didn't want the company to die. I wanted it to be mine. "Would you be willing to come back?" she asked. "As CTO. With a significant equity stake. We need someone who actually understands the technology to stabilize the platform. Derek's team is lost." It was the last thing I expected. An offer, not from Derek, but from the people who held the real power. They were choosing survival over loyalty. They were choosing me. "I need to think about it," I said. "And I need to talk to my lawyer." Priya was cautiously optimistic. "This is better than any settlement. You go back as the savior, not the supplicant. You control the technology. You have board support. Derek is out, at least for now. It's a win." "But the company is damaged," I said. "The brand is toxic. Users are fleeing.
Can it even be saved?"
"That's not your problem yet. Your problem is whether you want to try."
Do you?
I thought about the 5 years. The all-nighters. The breakthroughs. The vision I'd had, alone in my basement, scribbling on napkins. That vision was still alive, buried under the rubble of Derek's ambition. Could I dig it out? I told Diane I needed 48 hours. She agreed. In that time, I watched the company continue to bleed. User reviews were brutal. Tech blogs ran postmortems on the drama. Derek, holed up in his apartment, gave a disastrous interview where he seemed on the verge of tears, blaming misunderstandings and poor communication. It was pathetic and sad. The empire he'd built on my foundation had crumbled in days. And now, the board was offering me the keys to the ruins. So, what would you do? Go back, try to salvage the company, and risk being associated with a toxic brand? Or walk away, let it die, and start something new with your reputation intact and your story told? Let me know in the comments. The final part is about rebuilding, redemption, and the true cost of victory.
Subscribe.
I took the job. Not for Derek, not for the board, not for the investors. I took it for the code. For the millions of users who still depended on the architecture I'd built. For the vision that was still alive, buried under the rubble of his ambition. The first day back, I walked into an office that felt like a morgue. Empty desks, hollow eyes, the hum of servers that were barely holding on. Derek's farewell email to the staff was still pinned in Slack. "I'm stepping aside to let the company heal." He didn't mention me. He didn't have to. Everyone knew why I was there. I was the coroner, here to see if the patient could be revived. The first week was triage. I locked down the AWS account, changed every credential, revoked access for everyone who'd been part of Derek's incompetent engineering team. I pulled the plug on the optimizations they'd been pushing and rolled back to the last stable version of the core algorithm, my version from before the split. The app stabilized. The error rates dropped. Users cautiously started coming back. The second week was about people. I met with every remaining employee, one by one. Most were shell-shocked, unsure if they still had jobs, unsure if they wanted them. I was honest. I don't know if we can save this company. But I know we can't save it by pretending the last 2 months didn't happen. Derek is gone. I'm here. The technology is solid. The rest is up to us. Some quit. Most stayed. A few, the ones who'd been there in the early days, actually seemed relieved. One engineer, a kid I'd hired straight out of college, said something that stuck with me. "I always wondered why things felt different after you left. Now I know. It wasn't the same code. It wasn't the same app." The third week, the board met to discuss the future. Diane, the board member who'd recruited me back, presented a plan, Rebrand, relaunch, and focus on the core technology that actually worked. We have a CTO who built this from nothing, she said. We have a product that, at its heart, is still excellent. We have a story to tell, not the drama, but the recovery, the comeback. I was offered the CTO role permanently, with a 40% equity stake and a seat on the board. Derek's shares, diluted and stripped of voting rights, were reduced to a minority position. He was a ghost in the cap table, a footnote in the company he'd tried to steal. I accepted. The rebrand took 3 months. We became Voyant, a play on the original name, but with a new identity. The core algorithm was unchanged. My algorithm, still humming, but the interface was refreshed, the marketing reset, the narrative rewritten. We launched quietly, without fanfare, and let the product speak for itself. The reviews were cautiously optimistic. Back to its roots. The original magic restored. Feels like the old Voyager, but better. Users who'd fled during the chaos started trickling back. The download numbers, once a million, then 0, then a trickle, began to climb again. Slowly, organically, sustainably. Derek, meanwhile, faded from the tech scene. His attempts to launch something new were met with skepticism. Investors, burned once, weren't interested. A few blogs ran, where are they now? Pieces, framing him as a cautionary tale about ambition without ethics. I felt no satisfaction in his fall. Just a quiet, weary relief that he was no longer my problem. The twist came a year later. I was in my office, reviewing the latest user metrics. Voyant had just crossed 500,000 monthly active users, half of what we'd had at the peak, but growing, when I got an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line, a message. It was from Derek. Marcus, I know you have no reason to read this, let alone respond. But I'm writing anyway. Not to apologize, I know an apology after everything is meaningless. I'm writing to say you were right. About everything. The app was yours. The vision was yours. I just took it. Because I was scared. Scared that without me at the center, it would all fall apart. Turns out, without you at the center, it fell apart anyway. I'm out of tech now. Working at a coffee roastery in Portland. It's simple. Honest. I don't have to pretend to be something I'm not. I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted you to know that I know. And that I'm sorry. Derek. I read it 3 times. The anger I'd expected to feel wasn't there. Just a strange, hollow sadness for the partnership we could have had, the friendship we'd destroyed. I didn't reply. I didn't see the point. But I saved the email. Not as a trophy, as a reminder. A reminder that success built on theft is never stable, and that the foundation matters more than the facade. Voyant continued to grow. Not to unicorn status, not to billion-dollar valuation, but to something more sustainable, a profitable, respected company with a loyal user base and a clear identity. I hired a CEO to handle the business side, freeing me to focus on what I loved. Building. The architecture. The algorithms. The quiet, elegant logic that made things work. I still have the AWS root account. I still log in sometimes, late at night, and watch the servers hum. They're on a different account now, properly set up, properly secured. But the root credentials for the original account are still mine, stored in an encrypted file, a digital artifact of a war I never wanted to fight. The micro-niche here isn't just tech startup betrayal. It's about the invisible foundations, the code, the trust, the shared vision that hold things up. Derek thought the app was the product. He forgot that the app was just the interface. The real product was the architecture, the logic, the years of iteration and insight that made it work. And that he couldn't take. So, did I win? By the metrics that matter to me, building something that works, leading a team that respects me, creating value for users, yes. By the metric of revenge, maybe not. Derek's fall brought me no joy. The satisfaction came from rebuilding, from proving that the foundation was solid, from watching users return to something I'd made. The real victory wasn't in destroying him. It was in discovering that what I'd built was strong enough to survive even him. Have you ever had something you created, an idea, a project, a relationship, taken from you by someone you trusted? How did you respond? Did you fight or did you walk away? And if you fought, what did you learn about yourself in the process? Share your stories of rebuilding after betrayal in the comments below. Let's turn our scars into blueprints. And if this story of code, trust, and the hidden foundations of success resonated with you, share it. Sometimes, the most important thing isn't the part everyone sees, it's the part that holds it all together. Thanks for listening.